Fine, a bit evening. Okay, great. So my name is Gail Spicer, Interim Executive Director of Freetown Village Living History Museum. And our mission is to educate the public about African American history and culture in Indiana. And since 1982, we have traveled across Indiana and the Midwest, reaching 80 of 92 counties and every neighboring Midwestern state through more than 15 educational outreach programs. So tonight marks the fourth season of Conversations in Indiana, African American History and Culture, serving K through eighth grade audiences and beyond. And we are honored to welcome distinguished educators, researchers, professors, and historians who will share their work and deepen our understanding of those who came before us. So we invite you to join us each month, same time, same place. Visit freetownvillage.org to explore the full series, along with our programs, events, and reflections of our 7-week summer camp, where youth engaged in history, culture, teamwork, and enrichment experiences that build both knowledge and character. Tonight, I want to thank our sponsors for their support, the Black Heritage Preservation Program at Indiana Landmarks, Indiana Humanities, the Indianapolis Foundation, the Allen Whitehill Clues Foundation, the Indy Arts Council, the Indiana Arts Commission, IU Africana Studies, and the Joseph Taylor Branch. And really want to emphasize the Black Heritage Preservation Program here at Landmarks, who's given us this lovely space to do things, each month. So thank you to Eunice Trotter and to the whole organization. Our missions definitely align, and so they've embraced us as one of their partners. So thank you. If you value this work, we invite your support. Individual giving is just as important as foundation funding, which means any amount of donations online would be welcomed. Please consider making a contribution at freetownvillage.org as we work to reach our next 1 million participants. Tonight, it is my honor to introduce Bryan Glover. Bryan is Vice President and Board of Trustees of Roberts Settlement, where he has been instrumental in developing the Legacy Walk, a permanent outdoor exhibit highlighting Indiana's free Black pioneers. A Noblesville native and Purdue University graduate, Bryan is a direct descendant of the settlement's original founders. Now retired, he brings extensive experiences from small business ownership in Noblesville, as well as a career in the media and entertainment industry in Los Angeles. Bryan remains active in the community, serving with organizations including the Hamilton County Community Foundation, Hamilton County Historical Society, Noblesville Chamber of Commerce, and the Noblesville Diversity Coalition. His personal interests include biking, golf, reading, music, travel. Sounds like he likes it all. So now, following the presentation, we'll take questions from our in-person audience. And for those joining us online, please share your questions in the chat and we'll respond as time allows. To help us, let's see, the QR code up here. Nope, not yet. Okay, so before our speakers begin, we will share a short video from our Black History Moment series produced by, okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you Bryan Glover.
I have a choice. I can leave my glasses on and see you, or I can take them off and read my notes. So I think I'll take them off. Good evening, and welcome to my talk about Roberts Settlement, the Black pioneers at Roberts Settlement. Let me begin by thanking Miriam Omar and Freetown Village for the invitation to share the Robert Settlement story today. And also thanks to Indiana Landmarks, as always, for hosting us tonight. You've heard a little bit about me, so I'm going to go right into my talk here. I'm not a historian. I'm not a genealogist. I kind of consider myself more of a storyteller or curator. I take a lot of the work that others have done and try to mash it all down and present it in a way that helps everybody to understand Robert Settlement and the story of Black pioneers in Indiana, hopefully. I've got to find here we go. Robert Settlement is in Jackson Township, Hamilton County. While Robert Settlement no longer functions as an active community of residents, a few families continue to own and hold title to the land their forebears acquired in the 1830s, even though they reside elsewhere. Descendants, myself included, continue to call the chapel and cemetery Robert's Settlement, honoring the hallowed grounds our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents who spent considerable time visiting during an earlier time when many families did call Robert Settlement home. Then and now, Robert Settlement is a place where everyone is welcome to visit. So come up, sit a spell, as my grandfather would say, and take in the beautiful countryside and engage in our history. Someone who came in here tonight was talking about how far away Noblesville is. I won't name names, but I always tell people that Robert Settlement is not as far away as you think. So here's a map. Kind of shows you if we were started at Monument Circle in downtown Indianapolis, we're about 1 hour away if you go due north on US 31. So it's not that far. And if you live on the north side or the west side of Indianapolis, it's even closer. So we've got a lot of wonderful things up there for you to see. So we hope that you will come and see Robert Settlement and experience the place where these Black pioneers made their lives. I'm going to discuss Robert Settlement in 4 themes: roots and migration, progress and perseverance, faith and education, and legacy and footprints. While this is my presentation, it wouldn't be possible without the scholarship and the preservation work many others have done. First, I want to recognize my great-great-uncle, Dr. Carl Roberts, who preserved our family history and urged us to pass along these stories forward. I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Edgar Conkling. Conkling wasn't part of the Roberts family. However, he made major contributions about our history in his 1957 graduate school thesis, Robert Settlement, a mixed blood agricultural community in Indiana. Conkling's thesis provides an important sociological analysis of this relatively isolated, multi-generational Black settlement in rural Indiana. A special acknowledgement also goes to my friend, Dr. Stephen Vincent, a Noblesville native, whose research elevates the understanding we have of our ancestors' story. Dr. Vincent's 1999 book, Southern Seed, Northern Soil, offers rich detail and places Robert Settlement in its proper regional and national context, helping all of us to better understand the role Black pioneers played in United States and Indiana history. Finally, I want to recognize my sister, because if I don't, I'll be in big trouble if she's online. She's really our family historian. And she has leveraged all these resources that I just mentioned and the newer technologies that are out there to uncover even more of the story our forebears left behind. And that's why I encourage you to come up to Robert Settlement and see our legacy walk, which I'll talk about at the end of my presentation. There's a lot of good, rich history beyond what I can tell you in a 1-hour presentation. So let's start with roots and migration. I'm guessing that most of you are a little familiar with the history of Indiana's Black pioneering settlements. Robert Settlement's Black pioneers were a mixed racial identity and had been free from slavery for generations before the Emancipation Proclamation. History about the colonial era often refers to these mixed race people as free people of color, reflecting their mixed racial heritage. During this presentation, I'm going to use various terms. Most of them will be familiar to all of you to describe these pioneers. Terms such as free people of color, mixed race, free Blacks, and even pejorative terms like mulatto and colored, terminology we don't use today, but commonly used in bygone historical eras. The origins of free people of color begins in the 17th century colonial Virginia. Let's unpack what it meant to be a free person of color during the colonial period. As I said a couple of slides back, free people of color were of mixed racial origins. They were free by virtue of their mother's birthright. Partus sequitur ventrum, a Latin term, that which is born follows the womb, was established in 17th century slave codes. Children born to indentured white women were typically free, regardless of their father's status. Over time, Virginia-born free people of color migrated to the North Carolina frontier, where they encountered dwindling Meherrin, Tuscarora, and other Native American tribes. Colonial genocide had drastically reduced Native populations. Survivors adopted many white settler customs, made marital bonds, and nurtured families together with whites. Similarly, many free people of color also formed families with Native Americans as they settled in the North Carolina frontier. The slave codes were a socio-political hierarchy used as a means of control. Isabel Wilkerson, in her book Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent, defines caste as an artificial construction, a fixed and embedded ranking of human value that sets the presumed supremacy of one group against the presumed inferiority of other groups based on ancestry and other often immutable, unchangeable traits. To be a free person of color in colonial times was to occupy a social and political middle ground. So what drove the initial migration of free people of color from Virginia to North Carolina? Virginia's growing dependence on slave labor and restrictive laws imposed on free people of color drove them out of Virginia. North Carolina offered abundant, inexpensive land and a developing economy where free people of color could buy land and earn better wages using their skills. This migration was likely a slow, steady process. James Roberts, born in 1734, is our earliest confirmed Roberts ancestor. We believe he was born in the area highlighted by this brown circle up here. That's Northampton County in North Carolina. As the map shows, James and the Roberts family settled amongst the Native American tribes I mentioned earlier. From all evidence, James was born free, one of many free people of color in this region. At his death, James Roberts owned nearly 325 acres in Northampton County, and his death was in 1795. And he is my fifth great-grandfather. Free people of color from Virginia and North Carolina began migrating to Ohio and Indiana in the 1820s. The exodus accelerated following slave rebellions like the Nat Turner Rebellion in 1831. In southern states, whites were suspicious of free people of color. Free people of color threatened the plantation system and the slave economy. Whites viewed them as sympathetic and helpful to enslaved people fighting for their own freedom. To counteract, white colonists imposed legal restrictions and placed pressures on free people of color, causing an intolerable situation for many. James Long Jim Roberts, Long Jim was his nickname, and his cousin Willis Roberts, the grandsons of the other James Roberts I just spoke about, were among the earliest pioneers to migrate to Indiana. Willis settled in Rush County and Long Jim in Henry County, about 20 to 25 miles apart from each other. I think of Long Jim and Willis as family scouts, sent to evaluate whether Indiana was a place to go and be away from slavery and the threats they faced in North Carolina. With assistance from their Quaker neighbors in Indiana and North Carolina, they regularly exchanged letters about the dire situation in North Carolina and the hope that existed in the Indiana frontier. In one such letter, Long Jim shared good news with his North Carolina family. He informed his kin that he was raising hogs, had plenty to eat, and was, quote, living the way he wishes to live, unquote. These letters were unambiguous signals about the promise Indiana held for those contemplating a move to the Indiana frontier. The red arrow on the map shows the actual route from North Carolina to Indiana, detailed in the 1830 letter between the two cousins. When Willis grew homesick and asked Long Jim for directions home, Long Jim replied with a letter listing each city, town, and outpost for a safe return to North Carolina. This partial image on the left is a transcript of that letter from Long Jim Roberts to his cousin Willis. The letter contained very specific directions for the route, as I just mentioned, from where Willis was living in Indiana to their home in Northampton. While important, the directions home was not the most important thrust of this letter. Long Jim issued a stern warning to Willis that returning to North Carolina was a terrible idea. Long Jim warned that conditions had worsened since they left for Indiana, that slave hunters might snatch Willis and sell him into slavery, and that his children would be at risk for the same treatment. Long Jim's words made clear he no longer trusted many of his white North Carolina neighbors. Slavery had created an intolerable situation. Despite the warnings, Willis returned to North Carolina, but it wasn't long before he came back to Indiana for good. So let me clear up a common misperception that everyone at Roberts Settlement was a Roberts. Roberts was a predominant surname early on, but not the only one. Of the first three families to buy land, two were Roberts and one was a Walden, also from Northampton. Micajah Walden's second wife was a Roberts and a cousin to Elijah and Hansel Roberts, two of the founders. Within a few years of the first settlers came the Brooks, the Winburns, the Sweats, and the Newsomes, all from the same coastal plains region of North Carolina. Like the Roberts, each family stayed at the beach settlement in Rush County before settling in Hamilton County. The Gilliams were a slightly different case. Moody Gilliam, a Virginian, brought his family first to Stark County, Ohio, and then to the beach settlement before settling in Boone County, Indiana. Moody's second wife was Julia Ann Walden. There's always a connection. Moody was the first Black man to buy land in Boone County and is my third great-grandfather on my dad's side. After 1840, the race was on. These are just some of the families that came to Roberts Settlement. So when I speak about the Roberts family, I'm speaking about all the families at Roberts Settlement. This is Peter Roberts, born in 1824, just before his father Elijah Roberts migrated to Indiana. This photo was likely taken in the 1860s or 1870s when Peter was still a relatively young man. It's the oldest photo in our collection and the only one we have of someone born in North Carolina who came to Indiana. So here's a little statistic. Shows that how few free people of color were living in the state of Indiana. In 1860, so that at this point they've been here 25 years, there were 11,428 free colored in Indiana, less than 1% of the population. And 73% of them lived in small villages like Roberts Settlement and the Beach Settlement. The number of Black pioneers throughout the old Northwest Territories, 5 states, was quite small. These free Black pioneers were truly isolated in a variety of ways. This map from the book Bone and Sinew of the Land identifies 338 Black farm settlements throughout the old Northwest Territory from 1800 until just before the Civil War. Fewer than 20 of these settlements were larger than 400 acres. The backstory for each varied. Many were settled by free people of color, like Roberts Settlement. Others by self-emancipated enslaved people. Still others by whites who manumitted their slaves upon arriving in Indiana. The key takeaway is that Roberts Settlement is not unique. When we tell our story, we shed light on all the other important Black pioneer communities in Indiana. My second theme is progress and perseverance. This period lasted from the 1830s to the 1880s. Life at Roberts Settlement during its early years was difficult and offered no guarantees of stability or success. Soon after the first families arrived, a national depression hit. The Panic of 1837 lasted until the mid-1840s. Prices, wages, and profits fell. Westward expansion and public improvement stalled. Unemployment rose and pessimism abounded. If the wilderness and bad economy weren't enough, racial hostility in Indiana was never far away. Indiana was both anti-slavery and anti-Black. The 1850s brought ominous warnings that couldn't have escaped notice by Indiana's Black pioneers throughout the state. Fortunately, Roberts Settlement families were able to navigate around the new Constitution and other obstacles imposed on them. Most families at Roberts Settlement were established by 1851, and good relations with surrounding white neighbors who tended to be anti-slavery Methodists or Quakers. It's possible that some of these relationships with white neighbors extended back generations to North Carolina and Virginia. After all, the coastal plain region of North Carolina was home to many Quakers and Methodists who had also migrated to Hamilton County, Indiana. After 1851, far fewer families moved into the settlement. These later arrivals quickly moved on to Michigan and Wisconsin, where they established communities like the Beach and Roberts Settlement. Before Roberts Settlement, the Roberts and other Black pioneers established the Beach Settlement, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, in Rush County near Knightstown. The Beach Settlement grew quickly, forcing the next wave of arrivals to seek good, inexpensive farmland elsewhere. They chose Jackson Township in Hamilton County, a frontier area in the 1830s. Roberts Settlement's early settlers followed the same strategy as their beach relatives: find homesteads near Quaker and anti-slavery Methodist neighbors who could usually be counted on for a supportive and peaceful coexistence. Prospects remained bleak at Roberts Settlement until the 1850s, when the Indianapolis-Peru Railroad opened in nearby Arcadia and Atlanta. The railroad gave farmers better access to grain and livestock markets and brought consumer goods that improved home life. This is an excerpt from Stephen Vincent's Southern Seed, Northern Soil, which kind of shows on the left there the map, what it looked like by 1840, when there were maybe a dozen families in Roberts Settlement, to 1870, was reaching kind of as close to its zenith, when there were more than 1,800 acres and over 200 residents in the community. The frame structure in the upper left photo is Roberts Chapel. The chapel was constructed in 1858. It replaced a log meeting house that had served as a church, school, and meeting space for about 10 years. Building a church was a clear symbol. The families of Roberts Settlement planned to stay put in Hamilton County. The vestibule and the belfry in the bottom photo were added in 1914. Another sign of progress was a public school built in 1877 within a very close distance of all the Roberts Settlement families. Most, if not all, the teachers came from Roberts Settlement. Before the schoolhouse was built, the community held 2 school sessions each year in the settlement's chapel, which doubled as a schoolhouse. Several neighboring white children who lived near schoolhouse number 5 attended school with the Roberts children. This was very rare in the 1870s, but not unusual in rural, isolated areas like Jackson Township. A school shared by Black and white kids offers some insight into the good relations with within the Roberts neighborhood. There were 2 public schools, one a mile north, and one a mile south, that were built about the same time. White families could have opted for one of these 2 schools, but instead they decided to stay with their neighborhood school. Something to think about. Joining the Union Army, engaging in local politics, and entrepreneurship were more signs of progress at Roberts Settlement. Let me tell you about a few of our ancestors who came of age during this period, a period coinciding with the Civil War and Reconstruction. I'm going to start with John Newsom. About a dozen men, including John, enlisted to fight for the Union. John enlisted under the alias Jasper Newton when he joined the U.S. Colored Troops 31st Regiment, raised in New York. Why he used an alias and why he joined a New York regiment is unclear. He may have been too young. Preserving the Union and ending slavery was important not only for the enslaved, but also for free people of color who still felt they were not receiving the full set of rights enumerated in the Constitution. After his service, John returned to Roberts Settlement to work his farm in Adams Township. Following the Civil War, the men at Roberts Settlement wasted no time getting involved in Republican Party politics. In 1880, Eli Roberts entered the Republican primary for county recorder. Legend has it that a quid pro quo was established between Roberts Settlement's all-male voting bloc and the county's white Republican all-male party leadership. The deal was party leaders would deliver votes for Eli Roberts if the Roberts Settlement's male voters supported the party's preferred candidates elsewhere in the county. Spoiler alert, the Republican leaders failed to deliver, and Eli lost his bid. Eli's brother, William Penn Roberts, took the local Republican Party to task in an 1880 letter to the Noblesville Ledger. You can see, it's kind of hard to see, but I'll read a part of it to you down here. William Penn said, I quote, "This is the third time that we have offered a candidate from the ranks of the colored voters of Hamilton County. And we know of no good reason why the colored men who are as competent and as worthy as their white neighbors should not hold office in this county." A pretty brave thing for a Black man to do in 1880 in Hamilton County. But I think this kind of gives you some idea of the character of the people there. Penn's point was very clear. Black men had just as much right to ask for a white man's vote as a white man had to ask for his. William Penn went on to say that colored men had fought bravely to preserve the Union and thus had earned their place in the political structure. Stephen Roberts, pictured here, operated a livestock trading business in Hamilton County. Stephen worked with a man named Marion Allred and another man named Sam Craig, two Noblesville white livestock dealers who provided him with access to area farmers beyond the settlement. A local newspaper described Stephen as, quote, "one of Hamilton County's most respected and widely known livestock dealers." The woman on the left in this 1908 photo is Nancy Elliott Roberts, who was born in 1852, and she's believed to be the first Black child born in Noblesville. Nancy married Stephen in 1880 when she was in her early 20s. Faith and education is my third theme. Success at Roberts Settlement was grounded in hard work, faith, and education. The best way to convey what faith and education meant at Roberts Settlement is to share a few more of our success stories. But first, let me share some history about Roberts Settlement's connection to the Wesleyan Methodist Church. Interracial worship was generally rare in the mid-19th century. For Roberts Settlement families, however, worshiping with fellow anti-slavery Methodists who happened to be white was not unusual. Free people of color and anti-slavery white Methodists and Quakers had worshiped together in the North Carolina Old Country. In 1838, 9 early Roberts settlers and 9 whites formed Mount Pleasant Methodist Church that met at Wilson Barker's home near Roberts Settlement. This went on for several years, but in the late 1840s, the Roberts community decided to start their own church to better serve the growing number of families. They built a log meeting house and joined the Westfield Wesleyan Circuit that included Westfield, Boxley, Deming, Tipton, and a few other small communities. Church services were mostly led by circuit preachers. Revivals with neighboring Wesleyan churches were common. Many Roberts men became ordained ministers in the Wesleyan Methodist Church. Cyrus Roberts was one of those who became ordained as a Wesleyan Methodist minister. Cyrus was the brother to William Penn Roberts and Eli Roberts, who I spoke about earlier. Cyrus served Wesleyan churches in Ontario, Canada, Indianapolis, South Bend, Indiana, Zanesville, Ohio, Purdy, Tennessee, and other cities. In the spring of 1882, Cyrus and his family ventured to Purdy, Tennessee in McNairy County to lead a school established by the Wesleyan Church for Blacks who were being denied educational opportunities following Reconstruction. Cyrus and Catherine Roberts assisted and taught local Tennessee freedmen and their children reading, writing, and other life skills. Cyrus and Catherine renamed the school the Robertsonian Institute for Freedmen. Throughout their tenure, they experienced hostility from local Tennessee whites who opposed educating Blacks. Progress was further hampered by a lack of funding from the Wesleyan Church. Cyrus served for about 5 years before resigning in 1887 due to health concerns. During his illness, his wife Catherine took over many of his teaching and pastoral duties. Dolphin Roberts was a medical doctor and a minister. While living in Washington, D.C., he was appointed Recorder of Land Deeds by President Benjamin Harrison. Newspaper articles suggest Dolphin was on the front lines of fighting for civil rights. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, racial tensions were high in cities with significant Black populations. Violent white mobs terrorized Blacks in cities like Wilmington, North Carolina, and Springfield, Illinois, destroying vibrant Black communities to suppress Black independence and economic success. During the 1908 Springfield riot, Dolphin, now living in Chicago, urged his congregation at Quinn Chapel AME to prepare to fight back should rioters come to their neighborhoods. He exhorted them to arm themselves and protect their families and property, arguing that since the federal government was unwilling to protect Black people, citizens must protect themselves. Dolphin returned to Indiana in the early 1910s when the AME Church assigned him to Bethel AME in Indianapolis, the home church of Madam C.J. Walker during this period, the period she was building her magnificent empire. Like his cousin Cyrus Roberts, Dolphin was known to be a competent financial manager in addition to his preaching skills. These skills earned Dolphin numerous pastoral assignments within the AME Church during his lifetime. Ezra Roberts was from Kokomo, but his parents were born and raised at Roberts Settlement. Ezra earned his degree from Butler College, now Butler University. An exceptional student, he competed on the school's debate team. In 1905 or 1906, Ezra attended a 25th anniversary program for Tuskegee Institute and its founder, Booker T. Washington. Inspired by Booker T. Washington's message, Ezra wrote a letter to Washington seeking a teaching job at Tuskegee. His letter must have been persuasive. Washington offered him a position that Ezra immediately accepted, leaving behind a good teaching job, at Indianapolis Public Schools. After a few years, Ezra was placed in charge of academics for Tuskegee Institution. Our family historian, my sister, recently shared this Tuskegee yearbook photo, which I've added to my presentation. The woman standing in the middle of the photo on the right is Amelia Cromwell Roberts, Ezra's wife. Amelia, a New Yorker, met Ezra at Tuskegee. Amelia was head of physical education for women. She was a pioneer in developing athletics for women at Black colleges. Ezra and Amelia are both buried at Tuskegee University near Booker T. Washington's gravesite. An archivist at Tuskegee University shared this yearbook photo with Leslie. Our persistence with the university has paid off and will finally begin to yield some fruit. We hope to learn more about Ezra and Amelia's contributions at Tuskegee in the near future. Marcus Gilliam began teaching at Roberts Settlement School at age 15. He later taught at the Noblesville Colored School. Marcus graduated from Valparaiso College and earned his doctorate from Cornell University. His teaching career spanned Ohio, Indiana, Iowa, New York, and Missouri. In St. Louis, Marcus served as the principal of Waring School, a segregated colored elementary school. Marcus's second wife, Hortense Parker, pictured here, was also part of another family with a proud legacy. Hortense's father, John Parker, purchased his freedom from his Virginia enslaver. He moved to Ripley, Ohio, and started a foundry, receiving several patents for his inventions. John Parker is well known for his work on the Underground Railroad. Hortense's legacy includes being one of the first Black women at Mount Holyoke Female Seminary, now Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts. She studied music and taught at many of the Black schools alongside Marcus. So much is written about the men of Roberts Settlement, but the women's endeavors have received fewer headlines. Adora Knight is one woman that our Roberts Settlement family historian has diligently researched to establish a record of her life and accomplishments. Adora was the first African American to graduate from Muncie High School. She acquired her teacher training at Indiana State University in Terre Haute. For nearly 40 years, Adora was an educator, spending most of her life teaching primary grades at Lincoln School, an all-Black school in Terre Haute. She also served as principal at Dunbar School in Terre Haute. My final theme tonight is legacy and footprints. As the 1900s approached, younger generations of well-prepared Roberts took their skills beyond the settlement, ushering in a permanent downsizing of their rural farm community. Urbanization, farming mechanization, and other factors led to shrinking rural communities throughout the country. Roberts Settlement's fate was no different. Even as the community shrank, descendants' connections to the settlement and each other remained strong, and the legacy of accomplishment remained a source of pride to celebrate year after year. These maps give you some idea of how Roberts Settlement became smaller over time. The map on the left is one that I showed you earlier from 1870. And you can see by 1900, the settlement is much smaller in size. So just to give you some perspective, in 1870, there were 35 households enumerated in the census. There were 206 people. In 1880, there were 51 households, 266 people. That was kind of a high watermark for our settlement. By 1910, there were only 29 households and 104 people. And by 1925, there were 25 households and about 107 people. So from its peak, a 60% decline in the population. So where did they go? This map shows some of the places where second and third generation Roberts descendants went in pursuit of their dreams and aspirations. Skilled and professional job opportunities close to home were off limits for Blacks, even for well-liked and well-prepared Roberts men and women. Skilled and professional jobs were reserved for white men, and in some cases, like teaching, white women could apply. The young and talented Roberts men and women found options that fulfilled their dreams and aspirations. As beneficiaries of good educations, strong work ethic, and a supportive community, these younger Roberts were well positioned to be leaders in emerging Black communities seeking bright young talent in places like Chicago, St. Louis, Kansas City, and Philadelphia. I'm sure I've missed several names in compiling these lists of preachers and teachers, but these are the two career fields that were the most frequent career paths chosen by young people who had been prepared to lead and give back to others. Other less sought out careers included medicine, law, politics, and public service, and a few others that are mentioned here. I will speak more about the people whose names are highlighted in yellow in a few minutes. Let's talk a little bit about farming. We spent a lot of time talking about education and preaching. But remember, they all began as farmers. And by 1920, only a couple of dozen farms remained at Roberts Settlement. Nonetheless, those who worked the land will always be an important part of our legacy. Ira Roberts, pictured at left, and his brother James at right, inherited the land originally purchased by founder Hansel Roberts. Ira acquired additional parcels from small landowners to become the largest landholder at Roberts Settlement in the early 1900s. Both brothers attended pre-university and studied agriculture, likely without revealing their racial identity. Recent efforts by Purdue to identify its earliest Black students do not include either of the Rice brothers. After college, James took a job as a chemist for a Pennsylvania steel company. Professional jobs like chemists were off limits to Blacks in the early 1900s. James probably passed for white when he applied for his job. Family history tells us that a coworker ultimately discovered his deception, and he was terminated because of his racial identity. James returned to Roberts Settlement to farm with his brother Ira. The newspaper in the middle of this slide appeared in the 1947 edition of the Pittsburgh Courier, a Black-owned newspaper. The story tells of the Rice brothers' success raising cattle and the sophistication of their farming operation. Law and politics. Milton Roberts was a brother of Dolphin Roberts that I mentioned earlier in the last section. One early highlight in Milton's life was being part of a local Republican organizing committee that welcomed Frederick Douglass to Noblesville in 1880. Douglass came to Noblesville for a campaign stop on behalf of presidential candidate James Garfield. Sometime between 1880 and 1885, Milton completed his law studies and moved his family to Ottumwa, Iowa. Why Iowa? We don't know for sure. One hypothesis, Milton's well-known racial identity, meant that his future as a local lawyer was limited. Like James Rice, moving far away would allow him to conceal his racial identity, something he couldn't easily do in Hamilton County. We don't know if Milton consciously decided to pass as white. We're pretty sure that Milton never returned to Roberts Settlement after he moved to Iowa. We also know that another brother and a sister moved to Iowa. All appear to have taken or been unknowingly given a white identity by those who did not know. In 1899, in partnership with the Reverend U.B. Smith, a Methodist minister, Judge Roberts organized the American Home Finding Association, the oldest adoption organization in Iowa. Milton was the president of the organization until his death. Albert Roberts was born in Decatur, Van Buren County, Michigan in 1867. Albert's father grew up at the Beach Settlement and moved to Van Buren, Michigan, where he married Parthenia Winburn, whose family had also relocated there. In 1924, Albert Roberts became Illinois' first African-American state senator when he was appointed to an unexpired term. He made history again in 1926 when he was elected in his own right. His legal experience and skills as an orator helped him become the first African-American to chair an Illinois State Senate committee when he took the gavel for the Criminal Procedures Committee in 1927. Re-elected in 1930, Senator Roberts fought for legislation that outlawed discrimination in state public works building contracts. As a state senator, Roberts attended Robert settlement reunions and spoke to his Indiana family about the important topics concerning African Americans of the day. If you visit the Illinois State House, you will find a statue of Albert Roberts III in the Capitol Rotunda. Carl Roberts is arguably the most recognized Roberts settlement descendant. Carl was a grandson of the founder, Elijah Roberts, and as the youngest son, his father, Jonathan Roberts, his dad wanted him to take up farming, but Carl had other ideas. He left home as a teenager to live with his sister in Fairmount, Indiana, near Marion in Grant County. After graduating from high school, Carl pursued his dream of becoming a doctor. He graduated from Valparaiso College and then attended Chicago School of Medicine, now part of Loyola University, for his medical training. Carl was the first president of the National Medical Association, the equivalent of the American Medical Association for Black doctors. He also served as president of the Chicago chapter of the NAACP. Carl is largely responsible for organizing the Roberts family records and creating the first Roberts family tree that continues to serve as the basis for what we know about our ancestors. Carl is my second great uncle. So the question is, did he or didn't he? Robert Lee Wallace was, the arrows pointing at Robert Lee Wallace, was a mechanic and a race car driver. Car racing was not on the list of careers Bobby's parents had in mind. After all, his father was a prominent AME elder, and his mother was a teacher. In the early days of car racing, blacks were not allowed to compete against white racers. During the 1920s, blacks formed their own racing league called the Golden Glory Racing Circuit. Bobby was a successful driver on the circuit, but did not limit himself to it. Bobby spent time in the garages at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway amongst the white racing teams. Bobby's fair complexion probably allowed him to pass and freely move where darker melanated drivers and mechanics could not go. Deacon Litz was a driver, Indianapolis 500 driver that Bobby has been linked to. I'm really certain that the man standing to the left in the top photo, this man right here, is Bobby Wallace. The man behind the wheel, click one more time, is Deacon Litz. Unofficial accounts state that Bobby took relief laps for Deacon Litz or his mechanic in 1934. There is no official Indianapolis 500 record confirming Bobby's participation in the 1934 race. There is a 1932 record of a W. Leroy Wallace registered as a mechanic. Could this have been our Bobby Wallace using an alias? We may never know, but we'll continue searching for clues that may prove the legend of Bobby Wallace at the Indianapolis 500. Who knows who the first black driver was at the Indy 500? Willie T. Ribbs. Official. From raising and educating kids to tending farms, to nursing the sick and managing the church, the women at Roberts Settlement took charge of everything. Martha Lucetta Gilliam was the embodiment of the strong women from Roberts Settlement. What I'm about to say will come as no surprise to any of you here today. As I said earlier, it's easier to find written records about the men than the women. Jasmine Sutton, a history professor at Miami University of Ohio, once told me that the women's stories are not as hard to find as I might think. She said their stories will be found in less obvious places and may take a little more imagination to construct. She was right. The women of Roberts Settlement wrote essays as students, sermons for church services. They kept personal and financial journals. They created photo albums, scribbling brief notes on the backs of pictures before gluing them in. They collected and saved the family's heirlooms. In all these places are bits and pieces of their stories that can be stitched together to gain a fuller picture of their lives. Lucetta lived for nearly 102 years. She died in 1976. The woman dressed in black in the leftmost picture is Alzadia Winburn, my great-great-grandmother, born just a couple of years before Lucetta. They're cousins. Alzadia was 92 at the time of her passing. So let's fast forward to today. What's happening at Roberts Settlement? The chapel and cemetery remain as enduring symbols of this once thriving community. A couple of families continue to own land purchased by their ancestors. Their land is still under cultivation through contracts with local farmers. This is land that has only ever been owned by African Americans. Every July, Robert Settlement descendants gather for an annual family reunion at the chapel. Our reunion, known as the Robert Settlement Homecoming, has occurred every year since 1924. Through the most difficult times, the celebration has taken place without fail. Even during COVID, we managed virtual celebrations to keep our tradition alive. This group photo documents our annual gathering. We probably have 30 or so of these over that 100 years. So we're at the end of my presentation. I hope this time together has been interesting and informative. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to share the Robert Settlement story with you today. So I'm going to wrap up with a few important takeaways from the history and the stories that I've shared tonight. Following my wrap up, I'm going to share a few slides about our current preservation work at Robert Settlement, and then I'll be very happy to take your questions. So these are the takeaways I came up with, but you may have others, and hopefully some of those will come up in the questions that we have today. But the first takeaway is that color mattered in a society that used race to create and maintain barriers. Free status and ownership of property afforded a limited range of opportunities, often not available to formerly enslaved Black people. Unwavering faith and a commitment to education were necessary to overcome obstacles imposed by a society that was hostile to their progress. And family bonds combined with stable, supportive institutions created an enduring foundation for generations of descendants. That's so true today. And for them, the ability to maintain and nurture relationships with white co-religionists that shared similar values was a huge benefit. So what's new and what's coming at Robert Settlement? Oops, sorry, something got over here. First is the Legacy Walk at Robert Settlement, and I want to see if I can do this. The Legacy Walk at Robert Settlement is an interactive, self-guided permanent exhibit at the Roberts Chapel. The exhibit was made possible by the generous donations of our members and the local and national philanthropic community, who also gave of their time, talent, and treasure to make it possible. Actually, it all started with a small grant from Indiana Landmarks to do a conditions assessment of the study of the chapel. And out of that study came the idea for this Legacy Walk. But I invite you to make the trip to see our magnificent exhibit, an homage to Indiana's Black pioneers. The exhibit incorporates technology in the form of a mobile story app that can be accessed using a smartphone. The app contains animation videos, narrative stories, and other content that tell the story of Hamilton County's Black pioneers who founded the settlement. The exhibit is free to the public and is available from sunrise to sunset. The chapel is usually closed, but can be open for groups of 5 or more by appointment. I'm going to ask if you can play the video. I don't know that I can make it play from here. This will take about a minute, but you can. This is it's a video I shot at night, and you can get an idea of what this exhibit looks like. The lights only come on when I turn them on because we have a neighbor who gets kind of grumpy. So I turned them on to shoot this that night, but they're normally not on when you visit at night. So best is go in the daytime. You'll see on the right-hand side, there are story panels that tell basically the story. The themes that I talked about tonight are the same themes that are on the exhibit. So I guess the takeaway is that you don't need me. You can come and see this exhibit and learn this history for yourselves. And bring a friend. This is a memorial here to the men, women, and children of Robert Settlement. And the cemetery is behind the chapel. And then that's the end. So that's a little preview, a little teaser. So I hope you'll come up and see this exhibit that we have created for you. Oops. So coming attractions. About a week ago, the church bell was removed from the bell tower after having been in place for over 110 years. And by the way, if you're looking for us on social media, you can find us as Robert Settlement on Facebook and on Instagram. And we have a website, robertsettlement.org. While the bell has continued to ring for all these years, time and Mother Nature had their way with the bell that had called the community to worship for so long. The bell is now in the hands of Verdon Bell and Clock in Cincinnati. Another referral from Indiana Landmarks. That's how we found Verdon. They've been a great partner to us, and hopefully will continue to be a great partner. But they will sandblast, paint, and then outfit the bell with a new yoke, a new wheel, and a new clapper. When fully restored, the bell will be mounted on a new stand for its second act that we hope is for another 110 years. And this gives you some idea of what the bell will look like when it's finished. The whole process is going to take about 90 to 120 days. So stay tuned to our progress on our social media, and you'll learn more about it, the progress of the process as it goes along. And we hope to have a public dedication of the bell sometime when it's put back in service, hopefully before it gets cold in late October. And that's it. Thank you for listening and coming and joining us online. And at this time, I'm happy to take any questions that you have. Now I can see you very well. I think Miriam may she's going to get a microphone.
Bryan, that was great. Thank you so much. I mean, what a legacy. I'm curious about the connection to the Orange County settlement. I think it's Lick Creek settlement, which has a cemetery that's labeled Roberts.
There is certainly a connection, but it's one that we've been unable to establish. My theory is that the Roberts family had sort of separated, not because there was bad blood, but many of them had moved west in North Carolina, to the central part of North Carolina before they came to Indiana. So they came at different times and they came from different points. But if you look at many of the given names of the early settlers at Lick Creek, they are the same given names of the Roberts that are in my family that descend from James Roberts. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but we have names like Kinchin, Elias, they're not all the most common names. James is a very common name. So we have a feeling that they are related, and maybe it's only going to be through DNA that we're able to make some connections. But we believe that the Lick Creek settlement, and many of them after that settlement was that they moved away from there, many of them went to the Lost Creek settlement in Terre Haute, which is where they stayed for many generations. And then by the time the 1870s come along, there's a lot of intermarrying between the Roberts at Lost Creek and at Roberts Settlement, the Beach Settlement, and other places too. The Pettifords at Weaver Settlement in Marion. So the linkages between these settlements are I don't think you can dispute that, but sort of proving exactly what it is difficult. A couple of weeks ago, I was invited to a family reunion for the Bonds family at Lick Creek. And I went to that and met a lot of people who are descendants of the Robertses who went there. And we all swear up and down, we each look like somebody else in our family, but you know how that goes. But I truly believe there is a connection, just can't really prove what that is. Do you have a question? That's a great question. You want to ask them again? Maybe they want to capture that on the.
How do you feel like the early brothers traveled safely back and forth from North Carolina?
So at this time, and I've taken a lot of slides out to get this in under an hour, but a free person of color had to carry papers with them at this time, right? And to be without those papers could be really dangerous. And you're always at the mercy of slaves, people, looking to snatch people up and sell them into slavery. So again, it's a theory. I think they traveled in the company of these Quakers and anti-slavery Methodists. And the fact that they are people of mixed race, you saw the pictures. Sometimes you don't necessarily know what the racial identity is of these early ancestors. So they're traveling with Quakers as if they are part of the family. I've seen some letters. I can't think of this. Josiah Parker, I think, from who was part of the Quaker community. His letter. There's some letters at Earlham College, and in it, it mentions that James Long Jim Roberts and Willis Roberts as currying letters for their family, the Parker family from North Carolina, to their family in Wayne County. I think it's Wayne County, Indiana. So I think they're moving together, and that would make sense, because the safest way to travel would be in the company of those who are going to help you as you're on this journey. Because you saw the map that I had in the beginning. They're traveling up from the southern part of Virginia. They're right on the border of Virginia, all the way through the mountains and through Virginia to get to Maryland, where they pick up the national highway, the Cumberland route. And so once they got to that point, they probably felt relatively safe. But I think that most of the time when they're traveling, now when Willis got I won't say that word, but when he got the idea that he was going back to North Carolina, I don't know in whose company he traveled back, because I think most people, once they got here, they weren't going back. I can't tell you how that occurred, but he made it safely both ways. And again, he could probably easily pass as somebody for white anyway. Answer your question. Yeah.
Okay, Brian, I have a question. Let me ask you about the exhibit at night, and you have a friendly neighbor who doesn't like the light. Can that be turned on remotely, or we'd have to contact you to turn the lights on to
I'd be happy.
experience it?
Yes, well, first of all, I'd be happy to meet you there and turn them on for you. We're how do I say it? We're kind of a bootstraps organization. So, running the electrical is expensive, and that's another reason why we don't turn it on. But just trying to be respectful to her. We'd had some. I'll be honest, we'd had some issues getting the original variances to do the exhibit. Some of the neighbors were not crazy about the idea of this exhibit, thinking that it's going to bring, lots of people there and interrupt the tranquility of their existence in the country. So we got through that, and we just decided there's no point in antagonizing. We can't really afford to run the lights all the time, but it is beautiful when you turn them on. The problem is this time of year, to really get the benefit, you have to go there about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And as Jim knows, it's a long way up there to Northern California. But if you come, I'd be happy to turn them on, but you just have to come sometime after dusk, way after dusk, to see them. Wintertime, it's a little easier, but it's also kind of harsh up there in the wintertime. There's something different about that wind in the country than it is in the city, but yeah.
One more question. This has been brought to my attention over the years about the Roberts that left Indiana that went to Oklahoma. Is there any relationship with Oral Roberts?
I believe that is not, I don't think that is true. There were Robertses who went to Oklahoma. Many of them really claimed their Native American heritage and connection. There's even a story about a Roberts who went to joined up with a Native tribe in Washington State, I think, and became the chief of the tribe. I'm not sure what their criteria was for establishing his, him being the chief, but you'll see him dressed in Native American traditional clothing and things like that. And some that went to Oklahoma, lived in these places where Blacks had gone to Oklahoma near the Cherokees in Oklahoma. There were a lot of in the early 1900s, when the federal government had made money available to the Cherokee, many of the Roberts settlement families applied for this funding. I don't remember exactly what the act was that set this money aside. like a lot of us, we believe if we have Native American ancestry, that we're Cherokee, right? We all want to be Cherokee. But the Cherokee were in Western North Carolina and Alabama and places like that. The Roberts were in Eastern North Carolina, and that's where the Meherrin, the Tuscarora, the Occaneechi, these other tribes, this is where they were located. Some of the, like the Winburn surname is one that you will find in some of the Tuscaroras that are still in North Carolina. So again, something tells us that that's more likely those are the tribes that we are associated with, not the Cherokee. But in the early days, that was sort of the assumption that we are descended from Cherokee people.
A question here. You had shown a slide of the regional states and the settlements. I think I understood the settlements that were in eastern Indiana, but you can comment on that. But then also southwest Michigan, there was a cluster. So maybe you could comment on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I mentioned about Adelbert Roberts, the one who became the first elected state senator in Illinois. So I'm claiming somebody who's really not from Roberts settlement. His family started at the beach in Rush County. They passed through, had a cup of coffee at the Roberts settlement, and then moved up into Michigan, where again land was available. And so there's a cluster of settlements throughout Van Buren County, St. Joseph's County, and I'm trying to think of where Paw Paw, Michigan is. Like somebody could help me out with the county. Cass County, thank you. Cass County, Michigan. And those many of those Roberts were related to the families that began their Indiana existence at the beach settlement, and then moved on. And then there was some movement back and forth. John Anthony Roberts, who was the father of Dr. Carl Roberts, his wife was from the family had started out at the beach settlement, moved to Michigan, and he went to Michigan and took his bride, and they came back to Indiana. So there's definitely a connection again between all these settlements. If you go out into Cheyenne Valley, Wisconsin, there's another settlement there, and you find a lot of Waldens and rebels at that settlement. So yes, it's much like the question about Lick Creek in Orange County. There is a connection. It's just trying to establish precisely what that connection is very difficult. We haven't been able to do it yet. I keep my sister busy looking for the answer.
Thank you for a masterful presentation. I mean, this is extraordinary. And especially that map of the Northwest Ordinance with all the different farmsteads. I don't know if you could go back to that
I can probably.
but that was a map I think you were referring to with all the different farming. And if not, that's okay. But I was curious about three things that I had in mind. I'll try to keep it short, but there are those who have written about like utopian communes of this era. I think in particularly about John and Jane Peace, who wrote extensively about Negro utopians, communities where African Americans moved out of the South by way of being newly freed by former slave owners and into the Northwest Territory, into the Canadian Detroit-Windsor frontier and that kind of thing. And I was wondering if there was any utopian kind of settlement sentiment with the white Quakers and the blacks, or the white Methodists and the blacks who came out to Indiana. Maybe not. That was one question I had. And then I had another question about the current status of the site in terms of it being a state historic park or a national park. I'm sure you all have national historic designation or whatever, but where they're at with all of that. And so, and the other thing I was just going to make a comment about was the fact that with those kinds of settlements on the frontier, as the frontier kept on moving further west, I know some historians like Quintard Taylor and others have talked about the frontier is a racial zone of kind of cultural interaction. And I just found it very, very, very noticeable in terms of the racial admixture of the different settlers, and many of us who've been a part of that Western migration, and what role that race played in all of that. But first the utopian communes, and then about the
Well,
yeah,
thank you for that question. That was three questions. I'm not sure I can remember three, so you may have to help me out. But in terms of a utopia, I don't know if they thought about it that way, but I think they definitely thought it's good to stick together. So when they're buying land in these places, they're buying land pretty much, next door to one another, and since they're buying this land from the federal government, they're getting the first land grants. They're all showing up at the land office, kind of in mass. I'll take this one, because they knew there was safety in those numbers. And in the long run, it may have been something that created a challenge for them, because in terms of, this is my theory, in terms of expanding their farms, they were kind of locked in because everybody else had bought land around them. So in order for them to buy more, if they could even get the money to buy more land, they would have to go even further away from the settlement. And that's probably not something they wanted to do, because their family is here. So was it a utopia? I don't know. I just think they felt that they were safe, surrounded by people who would allow them to live as they wanted to live. I don't know how much involvement the Quakers and others had. I think it's when you need us, we're there. But otherwise, we'll leave you alone and let and let you exist. But when it came time to harvest, plant, all these things, I would imagine there was a lot of mutual support that took place. I've seen some records of a Quaker farmer more in Noblesville, but when they're doing the thrashing, you see all these names of these other, they weren't Robert settlement, but they were the Black farmers in the rural part of Noblesville, working collectively together to do things, right? So I think there definitely was very solid relationships that existed. Second question. Oh, so yeah, so a lot of cousins married cousins. They pretty much stuck to their, within their community. But I think as time went on, because I think if all the descendants of Robert Settlement were to come forward, even in Hamilton County today, we'd have a lot of people there. So I think a lot of people crossed that line and passed as white because, and I can't say I blame them. I mean, life was easier, right? It was easier to be white than it was to be Black at this time. So if you could, like the lawyer in Iowa who became a judge, he became a district judge in Iowa. This is Milton R. Roberts, the one who was involved with bringing Frederick Douglass to Indiana. He lives his life as a white man after he moves to Iowa. His sister marries a man from the Longtown settlement out in Randolph County or Wayne County, and his name is Epps. He was a teacher at the Union Literary in Longtown. He's a man of color. He becomes the mayor of Ottumwa, Iowa, and he runs for the state legislature in Iowa. He wasn't doing that as a Black man, So when it was convenient, where they had to, maybe they would have a laugh having a cocktail at night about their deception. But he and Milton R. Roberts were law partners in Ottumwa, Iowa, and they're doing it. So. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are probably others who can explain all that better than I can. So I don't want to step too far out of my comfort zone here, but yeah, so we're on the National Register of Historic Places. We've been there since I think sometime in the late 90s, early 2000, we got that designation. Besides the kind of a segue, but besides the bell restoration, we are going to be launching a fundraising. So that QR code you see there, after you give to landmarks and to Freetown Village, don't forget us in the mix. That chapel was built in 1858, and it needs a lot of while it looks really good, it's got old bones. And if you look at the engineering of that foundation, pretty amazing what they came up with in the 1850s, but it's not going to last forever. And we've got to do some major work to shore up that foundation. But we'd like to also recite it, new windows, put in HVAC so that we can use the venue year round. It takes a lot of money. Before we did the Legacy Walk, the first thing we tried to raise money for was to restore the chapel. And we applied for a grant through the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and we didn't get invited to apply. The next year we applied again with the idea for the exhibit, and we got approved for that. So some may say, why didn't you do the church, which is the centerpiece of your history? Well, we couldn't get that funded at first, right? And so we got, but everybody loved the idea of the exhibit. So we hope that this becomes this draw for people to come and learn this history. And if we can prove that this is a place where people want to come and learn history, then maybe getting the money to restore the chapel will be, I won't say it's easy, but hopefully it'll be possible. Hi.
I never remember the number of the road that goes through Robert.
276th Street.
276, okay. And the highway construction's tearing up my landmarks. So is there going to be an exit?
There is to get to it?
To get to it.
Off of US 31, there's a very nice roundabout there now, a figure 8, whatever they call it.
Okay.
That if you're coming from the south, southern part of the county, it's very easy to get to. And then if you're coming up the other side, there's a highway, State Road 19 that comes through Noblesville, and so it's kind of easy to find, and we all have Google Maps now, so we can get there. But it used to be a little tiny country lane that ran in front of the chapel. A few of you probably remember when your group came and did a performance of our homecomings. I mean, truly, it was a country road. Now it's kind of a super highway that runs through there because there's a Beck's Corporation, the corn and soybean seed company is on the same street with us, and the traffic it's no longer a country road anymore. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, thank you for being such a great audience. And I appreciate the opportunity to come here and speak to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryan, for that wonderful, wonderful presentation. I mean, so much more information I'm sure that there is out there that I would love to be able to research. So now, will we have a QR code? But to help us continue offering high quality programs, there should be a QR code coming up. And we encourage you to complete a short evaluation. In-person guests may scan the QR code on screen, and the online participants will receive a link. So I'm going according to this script here. So if behind me is not going according to the script, we'll fill in as appropriate. So, but your feedback really helps us measure the impact and secure future funding for us to continue on with this type of programming. So if you can do that, visit freetownvillage.org to learn more about our programs. And I believe our next conversation session is on August the 20th, was that? Okay, August the 20th. Please come back please come back and have your friends, bring friends with you or have them go online, because this is really an invaluable series. I think it's a series, first of its kind, and for it to be presented by Freetown Village is really a testament to the type of programming that we offer. So complete the evaluation, give to Freetown Village, or give where your heart, your passion is. So whether or not that is Roberts Community or Landmark or Freetown Village, it's all good. So thank you so much for coming.